Can you see, all of you? Please have a look at the people who have joined. More than 50% of the class is of persons who are outside our sections, A and D. It's less than 50% from the students who I'm supposed to teach, and majority is of students who I have not been assigned to teach. So A and D certainly don't want to be taught by me, but people from outside, other than this section, they want to be taught by me. This is interesting.
Ma'am, knowledge is free, I think, and people are interested in your class. That's why outsiders are here. I hope so.
No, no, that's all right. That's what I'm saying, that outsiders are interested, but those who have the obligation to attend my classes, they're not attending. That's what I'm saying. I'm not objecting to the outsiders coming. I'm saying I'm kind of concerned about the people who are supposed to be here. They're not here. Less than 50 at this point of time. I think it's exactly no. It's less than 50% of the classes of section A and D. Majority is outside the class. So okay. Returning to anyone who can recall what is it that we were discussing yesterday? What were the key points of the discussion?
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, we discussed Moira Gittins and Robert J. Robert J. Stroller and the theories how sex is itself gendered according to Moira and incapability of women to control bodily fluids. And we also talked about transsexual people, who they are and how law is primarily male, and the feminist approach to it and the individualistic approach according to the uh, of the jurisprudence, um, and how feminist approach is more towards connectedness rather than individualism. And I just had one question, if I may ask, about how the law would change if we were to have feministic approach towards it, like how connectedness would impact the law. That was my question.
I think we'll have to. We do not have an answer. It's good to have lots of questions. It is not essential that I'll have. Uh, Ensure you'll have to mute yourself because there is a resounding happening. So the question, and it's a big question, and if we had clear answers to that question, we would have changed that law today. The thing is certainly that the basic understanding of that who are human beings, that needs to change to as a starting point. And if we are saying all human beings are independent and free, and they're all moral human beings, then we cannot make distinctions by reference to their sex. At the same time, we have to recognize that the experiences of people in their lives are very much caused by or are connected with the sex they have. So, therefore, recognizing the difference is essential, but making hierarchies because of the difference is not at all essential. So, the law will have to change that approach, that while recognizing difference, one has to um, do away with the hierarchy. So, if we were to go back to one of our discussions, which we did halfway, we looked at the question of the maternity leave and whether it's Article 15.3 or it is Article 14. And the submission was that it is actually 14, but understood as 15.3 because of the manner in which the language is formed. That if there is a law which is made only for women, we believe this is a special law protected by or enabled by Article 15.3. But 15.3, we were saying, is applicable to those scenarios where the law could have applied to both, but only one has been given the benefit. But in case of maternity leave, we know that men don't need it, and therefore there's no need to make it as in the language of a universal law. But even if you were to, but if you were to frame the law in the universal terminology, the leave would have been still taken by women alone. But then we would have said, no, it is an Article 14 legislation. So that's where sometime when we have, and we will be during the course of our, during this course in the semester, we will be looking at gender neutral laws, which are on the face of it gender neutral, but in fact do not um, think of all the human beings. They also still take the men as the standard for laying down the norm. So there are laws which are made specifically for women under Article 15.3. And then we need to look at the language of those laws to say whether substantively they are protecting the interest. So we have seen, and we will continue to see in our discussions in this class, that how many laws which were made specifically for women, they were couched in languages which provided a lot of loopholes for men to get out from the liability. Or they were symbolic that, yeah, no, they will satisfy the need for the demand for the law for women, but actually will change nothing on the ground. And this is inbuilt into the legal mechanism itself. So there would be a scenario where somebody has, some law has been made which was meant to be implemented. And then we have a problem in implementation because of the people who were given the responsibility. But many a times the law itself is made in such a manner that it can absolve the men. Because when you look at lawmaking, there are usually three groups of people who are uh, responsible are connected with the law. One set of people are called as the elites, the set of people or individuals or groups or pressure lobbies which are asking for change. Then there will be another set of people who will benefit with that change. And a third group of people will be the one, what we call as the targets, who need to change their behavior. So certainly the target group wants to resist the law. Beneficiaries will be happy to have the law. And the beneficiaries themselves sometimes can be the elite, sometimes it can be a third set of people who are asking for, because the beneficiaries themselves are not capable or they're not organized, they do not have the means. So when you look at any legislation, the interplay of these three groups will determine what will be the form of the law. Lawmaking, we say, is for promoting justice, equality, rights, but primarily it is a political activity. The legislature which makes the law is a political entity. They have to come back to power, and they come back to power on the basis of the votes, the popular votes. So if they become an unpopular government, they will not be re-elected. So therefore, they will try to balance these three groups in lawmaking. So if they think that the elite or the beneficiaries are very powerful and they will impact their outcomes, the law may actually be framed in a manner that it can be implemented with effectiveness. But if the lobbies are more or less balanced, they would want to maintain the status quo. By the status quo, the lobby, which is the target group, is not affected, but the beneficiary group is happy that we got the law. So people outside the law do not understand this nuances of the law. So the NGO will be happy, oh, we asked for it and the law has come. So they are now on the government side. The other side is also happy that this law is not going to make any difference. So somewhere the government gets to get both the sides on their side. And that we will examine. So when we say what kind of changes, it's all a question of what kind of environment we create when the changes will be brought in. So when you look at, way back in your family law course, you would have seen that judgment, I think it's called Bhaurao, in which the question of bigamy was there. And the judges said that unless the second marriage is a valid marriage, it is solemnized with proper ceremonies, the man does not commit the offense of bigamy. Now that's something which was not there in the legal language of section 490, I think 494 is the section. So there's nothing, it just says whoever marries. So to the world, this man claimed that this is my wife. by garlanding or whatever. So, and he and the woman are living as husband and wife for the rest of the world. But for the purposes of law, the interpretation given to the words was to get the men out of the penal consequences. You will find lots of examples like that. The other day, I did ask the question, why, despite Article 13, we still have personal laws which are discriminatory, violative of Article 14 and 15.1. How come they have survived? By technical interpretation of the law. So the law may not be, sometimes the law is ambiguous, sometimes the law is not ambiguous, but judges and lawyers, of course, they find a way to create ambiguity which doesn't exist. And this will be done in a manner to give benefits to some group, usually the powerful group in the group. Going back to the maternity law again, so we have three kinds of leaves. One we call is all connected with the childbirth. One is the maternity leave we are all familiar with. We're also familiar with the paternity leave. And we are also aware of the child care leave. Now, what is the nature of these three leaves? Are they the same kind? They're different kinds? What is the value? What is the message that we are giving? Why have we given maternity leave to women?
Ma'am, so
Yes.
that when she is in the advanced stages of the pregnancy and when she delivers the child, so if
Mhm.
she is having any health problems, so to accommodate that, and after the child is born, to breastfeed, and like for the initial phase the child has to stay with the mother. So
Mhm.
for that purposes is the maternity leave.
Great. So what about the paternity leave?
Ma'am, I feel that the paternity leave is for the husband to assist the wife, like taking to the hospital, bringing her back, and arranging the things in the house, like while the wife cannot do some things because of the baby.
Mhm. And why do we have the child care leave?
Ma'am, I think the child care leave is the leave which a woman gets in an extended period of time
Mhm.
during the time her children are in the school.
Mhm.
That one, so that is, I think, because the women say that, I don't know what the women say or not, but the justification is that during the exams and stuff, so the kids need their mothers with them,
Mhm.
so to accommodate that thing.
Okay. So now look at the durations for each one of them. The first one is certainly around the pregnancy, and which is perfectly fine. The body also, the woman needs to recoup. The baby needs intense care. So it is for both the interest of the child and the mother. Now look at the father. He discharges all his responsibilities toward looking after the newborn baby and the new mother within 15 days. After 15 days, this woman does not require any more care. While she can take 3 months, she needs 3 months to recoup, but the husband will provide support only for 15 days. And for the rest of the minority of the child, the father doesn't have any obligation to look after the child. The mothers, till the age of 18, are permitted to take leave up to 2 years, till the age of 18. So what is the law saying? It is the child rearing, not only bearing, of course, a natural function, but child rearing is also a woman's responsibility. The men, they don't have children. And look at the family structure. Usually the father would be more educated, but who takes the leave for coaching the child for exam is mother. Why this more educated father doesn't take that leave, or why has not been enabled to take leave? It's not a question of that he doesn't. He's not, even he wants to, he doesn't have that leave. So the law is very categorically promoting. So this is a new law, but nothing to know, and this is certainly not coming from our understanding of as to who are human beings and what are their functions. We are still going ahead with the private, public, and with the subordination of women. That women, and I was just wondering, it was just a thought today. It came to my mind. We had all this big celebration about Indian cricket team winning in Australia. And Virat Kohli is not there. Virat Kohli is the new father. So I was just wondering whether Virat Kohli would think, oh, all this accolade would have come to me if I was not on paternity leave. And this is what happens to a lot of people who take away leave for their children. That accolade which could have come to them if the child wasn't there would no, they would be the one who will be the hero or heroine at that point of time. But if you take leave, then you miss out opportunities. And so the men are obligated to miss, not obligated, if they want to, they can miss out on the opportunity for 15 days. But woman must sacrifice her career up to 2 years, as and when there is need for the child, whether it is illness, whether it is parent-teacher meeting, or whether it is the schools and the board exam for the child. So women by law have been facilitated in continuing the job that they have. So at one level, we'll say, oh, this is a taking reality of women's lives, because they, in fact, do look after. Whether they had the leave or not, they would have taken the leave without pay otherwise. But if suppose the law would have provided that either parent can take leave, maybe it's again only women who will end up taking leave, but there will be some women who would be able to negotiate. There will be some men who would want to take that leave. But law hasn't given that option to them, neither to the women nor to the men. So sometimes we do make laws bring about change or recognizing the hardship caused, but by addressing that, we are still addressing the issue from the patriarchal perspective, not from the difference perspective, not from the equality perspective. So when you say what kind of law, I think these are the considerations while we are making law. And certainly these considerations will apply to different fields. So that was a long question to a difficult question, because there is no one-liner answer to that. But these are the considerations, these are the analysis one has to do as to what kind of factors will have to be taken note of while we are making the law. There was somebody else who said, I have lots of questions. Can we have those questions in the next class? And I said, yes. Anybody else who has any question? That was a good summary, Insha, of the class discussion we have had. The important lesson we had from that class is that the simple answer to what is the difference between sex and gender, to say, oh, sex is biological and gender is sociological, is a very simplistic answer and is not the complete answer. We have to say that, yes, as a starting point, that's true, but also sex also is gendered. Sex, the very body of the human being makes a difference, determines what status that person will have. The body features determine what is attributed to them as natural function of that particular set of people. Any other question, observation, thought?
Ma'am, I just want to share something I read yesterday in Arundhati Roy's book. So she has written that in many languages like Danish and Latin and Urdu, the literal translation of the word for vagina means something which brings shame. So itself, like we treat menstruation as a shame-giving thing, but even the organ is associated with, and the literal translation of the word also comes out to be shame only.
No, the language is very powerful to create values. Now, this whole thing about the literature and constantly the English literature and the English language, very specifically in our law, also we say he includes she. And he and its derivatives includes she and its derivatives. But when the word man and woman are used in criminal law, man means the male human being and the woman means the female human being. So there is a distinction. But in the literature, when we say mankind, are we excluding women? We say women are included in mankind. So lots of words have got the same, words create pictures. So think of a farmer in your head and tell me, how does the farmer look like to you? What is the image in your head? In that classroom, I would say, okay, draw it. So you can still do that. Take out your pen, pencil, draw a farmer. I'll give a series of them. So draw a farmer, a teacher, write down the categories. Farmer, teacher, a judge, a jailer, and a doctor. So very quickly draw. Everybody. And again, this is not a drawing competition. So it is just a reflection of what is in your head, what is the image you have in your head for each one of them.
Ma'am, for a farmer, it's a male figure. And for
All
a
of them?
teacher, it's a female figure.
Okay, for Mariam, it's female for teacher and all others are males.
For judge, also female figure comes.
Judge also female, okay. Anybody else?
Ma'am, because
I
this
want
is
to
gender
focus.
justice class,
Yeah,
so I am little bit more conscious like which gender I am using. So here I am very much conscious. But if like someone else have spontaneously asked me this question, I would have like thought of like a male figure, most probably. But now
yeah,
it's
but how many of us, no, how many of us have drawn a farmer? We have drawn a farmer? How does this farmer look like, apart from being a male? Does he have a hull, a plow, and a pagad?
Thin
Huh?
person, very ordinary clothes.
Ordinary cloth, thin person, मगर उसका पगड़ भी होगा और उसका हल भी होगा.
Yes, ma'am.
तो 2021 में है हम. आजकल ट्रैक्टर फार्मिंग होती है. बट अब मेंटल इमेज हैजंट चेंज ना. वो स्कूल में पढ़ा था क से किसान शायद, या पता नहीं, जो आप लोगों ने एफ से फार्मर पढ़ा होगा शायद. तो वहां पे जो इमेज लिखी थी वो आज तक, the images for generations in the ABC books haven't changed. So how now, if the changes have not, and do we know that how many women farmers are there? Are women farmers at all?
Yes,
If
yes,
ma'am.
somebody
ma'am.
does,
More in number.
मगर yeah, मगर दिमाग में तो नहीं आती ना. This is all the terminology we are talking about, the power of the words.
Excuse me, ma'am.
जी.
Ma'am, I did a quick
कितने लोगों ने टीचर जो ड्रॉ किया उसको चश्मा लगाया?
Ma'am, the Google search
Okay.
also shows the similar images that pops up in our heads. For a farmer, it's a male, and when we Google teacher, all the pictures are predominantly female. Like the first 4 or 5 pictures are of females.
Mm-hmm.
And then for judges, surprisingly, there is male and female both. But for doctor also, there is mostly male pictures when you Google these words.
Mm-hmm.
And the farmer pictures.
Yeah, no, I was sitting with this a bunch of judges for doing a training, and I asked them to draw a judge, and including women, they all drew a man. I said, you yourself is a woman and a judge, but in your head, you are still, you're still supposed to be a man. So this is what the power, and unless you start challenging and focusing, as Saroni said, that unless we pay attention, we do it sometimes also that, okay, let's draft, let's make a movie and think of Bollywood actors who will be suitable for this job. Again, we end up with the same stereotypical images that if it is, if I will say, okay, a police, so draw these many, draw a woman, a doctor, a farmer, a teacher, And the students were struggling with 10 different images. I said, can this one woman be not sufficient for each one of them? So we're very typical images that, a doctor has to look like this, a teacher has to look like this, a jailer has to look like this, a policeman must have a danda. So we have all these images. But basically, it's the human being who is all this. So you could have drawn just one human being and said, okay, this person can be anything. But that's not how our mind works. And unless we become conscious of how our mind works, we will continue to have these stereotypical images. So, okay, any more questions from the last class? Otherwise, we'll move on to Carol Pittman.
Ma'am, I have a question with regards to gender. Hello.
Yes.
Ma'am,
Yes.
can be the gender be included with just right now we are having three type of gender: male, female, and transgender, right, ma'am? And the fourth one
Ji.
we can have that like artificial intelligence, some type, matlab, the gender with intelligence from computer terminology, like can we include in that?
Whether artificial intelligence has been recognized as a human being.
Yes, ma'am. Like Sophia, one artificial intelligence has been given citizenship of Saudi Arabia. So I'm talking about in future. Can the gender be terminology can be enhanced in that level?
I do not know. I do not know. I did not know that Sophia was a citizen in any country.
Yes,
And
ma'am. It has been granted. That's why I am asking, ma'am.
no, for me, I do not know this, so I cannot make a comment on that. But certainly, when now we are beginning a language that the third, one of the people can decide that I don't want to be referred to as he or she. I want to be referred as they. And this whole English grammar is going haywire with the new terminology perception. And ZER is being used as as an alternative, and it's not necessary that it's only the third gender who will be using ZER. It can be used for anybody. So instead of saying his or her, we'll say ZER. The prefixes, the honorary prefixes as Mr., Ms., Mrs., etc., are now being changed to MX. So, I mean, there is effort. Where we will end up at the end of the day, we do not know in 20 years from now. But and also I think I want to make a correction there when you said there are three genders. Actually look at the flag of the trans LGBT community. It's a 7 colors. Initially it's but 8. Now we've got 7 colors in that. So the rainbow depicts that there is not one group called LGBT or transgender. There's such a hue that you cannot identify that is only 3. There are a whole lot of complications out there. And do a Google search on number of sexes. There are more than 52 listed. 52 just sex. So it's not only 3 that we are talking about. I think it's 52 or 58, something like that number is there of just the sex category. And that is where understanding who you are is a very, very difficult, who you are in terms of sex and gender. It's not a straightjacket formula. In the classroom, we say, okay, stand up. Here is the line, the center on the left of it is all women, it's on the right is all men. And it's a whole huge horizontal line. So extreme right will be extreme male who think they've got no qualities of women at all, and extreme left will be women who have got no qualities of men. And then there is this, as you come closer, you are coming closer to the other. And we find the whole class divided on that. When somebody stands right in the middle, that no, we are neither men nor women. We want to be asserting that we've got qualities of both. Some will be very categorically standing on the sides, only indicating that within the men-woman category also there are ranges. that how far you think, how different you are. You're completely different than women. You have got somewhat there, and you have got you understand that no, there's no distinction at all. So I have lots of students standing, one after the other on the center of the line. So these are the things, so just to understand that within the male women category also, it's not absolutely that it's a black and white, that this is white, this is black. There's lots of grays and there's lots of gradations within the same gender or the same sex and gender within the same gender. And sex certainly is the biological group that we're talking about. So there are lots of them there. And it's for purpose of ease, we say 3. But when you look at NALSA judgment, they also recognize that it is a very, very big group of people there. And if you look at our chapter, some chapters somewhere when we're talking about specifically focusing on the others, we have says LGBTQI+++. So that's because initial term was there 4. LGBT stood for lesbian, gay, transsexual, transgender, and bisexual. Then the other group of people came and they said, no, we are, one of us, there's a problem about clubbing these 4 also. Because all the 4 have got very different kind of challenges. Their challenges and their difficulties are not the same, but they're grouped together. But then other people, Hijras, H is for Hijras, they came and said, no, we are not LGBT. We are independent identity. We're different from men and women, but we are different. Then came the intersex person. So intersex said that, no, we are different than any of that. Then we got the queer. Queer said that, no, we do not want to be having a straitjacket formula. We want to have a separate identity. Then we have the asexual person. There are lots of them there. So there's a plus because we cannot have this string continuing. So now we're saying we are recognizing that within this category called T, there's a whole lot of a range of characteristics and not only physical but also psychological and not psychological socialization levels of difference and perceptions are there. So certainly, and we'll be looking at some categories just to understand the complexity of how a person defines themselves. Any more?
Ma'am, I want to add a small comment. As he's talking about Sophia, she is also portrayed as more in feminine. She's wearing eyelashes and eyeliner. She used they used to dress her more in feminine way. So though she is a robot, but still we are portraying her in way we are gendering her without having
No.
any sexual.
In case of Sophia, she's very categorically woman. And also, when you look at comics, so we have any comic, all the characters in the comics were men and women. Now they are introducing trans characters also in the comics. So yeah, this is a increasing inclusivity. So might be we'll have a robot, an intelligent, and artificial intelligence also 2 kinds. One is this robo kind which has been fed information. And then the respondent, I think Sophia is in that group of IA. There's another group of IA, which once they have, because when we say Sophia kind of robo, they respond as per what has been fed, what the program says to them. But now we are developing IA, which will be able to take its own decision independent of what has been fed. And one of the research scholars is working on that. You make a very clear distinction between the 2.
Yes,
and so in that category, the other category which will be able to take its own decision, whether that will have its own personality, what will be the status of that IA? Because in this case, the liability, if the Sophia robo, for example, goes and kills somebody because of the malfunctioning in the programming, who will be responsible? Sophia can't be sent to prison or sent to this, but the creator may have a responsibility. But in the case of the other categories of IA, where they will be taking their independent decision, the creator does not have any control over that. So I think it's a developing field, and we do not know what kind of developments will be there and where the science will lead us. So yes, we'll wait and watch and see how it goes for the new categories of people who, I mean, at one level, we say Ganga is also has a Ganga has been recognized as what, a human person. So we are on the faith, and we have had um, litigation in the US, which they're saying that, I forget now, chimpanzee or gorillas, or there's one set of those species are also being asked to be recognized as human beings. So who will all become human beings is a different question. But today, the human bodies as we recognize them, even they were not considered as human beings, is the point we're making in this course. That even we are not talking about who are not physically human beings, whether they be human beings or not, because we are not talking about what we call them as the idol is a legal entity. So we are not talking about the gender of the legal entities. We're talking about the physical bodies of human beings divided into categories and then their legal status. So let's come back and focus on that. So having looked at the bodies and saying and constructing by our lots of kind of things going around us, we have created a scenario whereby we said that female body is inferior and it's been accepted. The whole patriarchal system is coming from that. And coupled with that is the political thought about how the state came into being, whether you look at Marxist philosophy, you look at liberal explanation of how the state came into being. They were all recognized that women have a secondary state. And the Marxists said they got a secondary status because of the capitalist system, which focuses on control over means of production. And women are also seen as a source of production of human beings. And therefore, they have to be subordinated because of the concept of private property and for protecting that property. She will be producing more children, whom then the men will continue to have ownership over. Do you believe our cultural stories or mythological stories in different religion, do they give absolute power to the father over their children? Ownership powers over their children?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you think which story? Can you
Ma'am,
think of any
Ramayana,
story?
Ramayana, where
In
Ram
Ramayana,
had,
where is the ownership?
ma'am,
Where
because
is the ownership?
Ram had to go to the forest because his father asked him to.
No, but that was not ownership. He kind of, he in fact later on said that, no, don't go. But he said, no, no, no. If you have told me once, I'll do it. So that was voluntary action by Ram. That was not, I mean, that's your wish is my, what do you call that? Your wish is my command. So that's a different scenario. Distinguishable.
I mean, previous class you have taken example of Raja Harishchandra and the concept of Kanyadan.
Yeah. But also all those stories now where goddess appears in your dream and says, sacrifice your son as a test, and the father goes and sacrifices. How can you sacrifice your son if you don't have ownership? So, of course, in these stories, the son never dies. Either the god appears, is appeased before the child is killed, or appears later on, and comes back to life because the father has passed the test. These are all examples, and these are examples available in all.
Islam this story appears.
Yeah, Islam and Bible, we both, we have these examples in all categories where the son can be sacrificed to the god. This is the test which is being done, and it's assumed that they have. And in fact, the English phrase for it is parens protesta. Later on, changed to parens patria, where it said taking care of the child as a parent. There was a complete ownership category. Certainly, the explanation has been that the coordination of women and children happened because of the concept of private property. The liberal is about the social contract, whereby order to have more peace and freedom for each one of the persons. And they're not persons, they're saying the white men got into a contract whereby public sphere was to be regulated by the state. Individuals gave their monopoly, they gave monopoly over violence to the state. Any violence can be done only by the state and the public sphere. Private sphere is none of their business. The public sphere was required to have to increase my capacities as a private person. I have property, but unless other people come and keep attacking and stealing my property, then I cannot have peaceful life in my private life. In order to have better private life, I needed public sphere to be treated as safe place, regulated by a party called the state. In that whole example, in the whole system, the public sphere is contrasted with the private sphere. And that's what Bateman is talking about. With the classification of women as subordinate. Private sphere, subordination of women because they were seen as inferior. Therefore, they had to be subordinated. Men have to regulate their behavior, their actions, and their freedom and whatever. And the women, it was said that the division of private public has foundation in the nature. Nature has made women weaker and has made men stronger and more capable. When the nature has made them more capable, have also then created culture. This contrast has been there between nature and culture. Nature is seen as subordinate and women are closer to nature, but they have to deal with the raw product of the nature, young children. Women are closer to nature because of their capacity to give birth. Therefore, nature is subordinate, women are subordinate, men are seen as the culture, and culture is seen higher than nature. Culture is the result of, it is a creation of human beings with their intellect, with their directions, with their values, with their ideology, with their mind. This is all men have, and men have created. Men are like culture, women are like nature, and therefore subordination is natural. When we look at the liberal thought, two things which are happening there. One is this private sphere, which is completely patriarchal. Other one is the public sphere, which is a place of equality. And these are contradictory things, because once you say human beings in the public sphere are equal, are independent, are free and equal, then why is it that in the private sphere they are not so? Liberals have not questioned, even the liberal feminists have not questioned the division between private and public. Private sphere seen as place of love and affection, sentiments, relationship by blood. That's what is seen as the private place. Public place is impartial, there's no connectivity, there is no relationships, it is a place of equality. The public sphere, it has to be of equality. And this is a place where men and culture exist. Private sphere, there are men also there, but in the private sphere, because it is based on blood and all other kinds of things. This is the contrast, that in the liberal thought, the division of private and public is essential. And if it is essential, then paternalism, patriarchy, the private sphere coexist with the equality in the public sphere. And Carol Bateman is saying, actually, these are not independent. They're so complex and so closely interconnected with each other They are actually two sides of the same coin. Not that the private sphere, so in order to maintain their primacy, division has been taken. What has been contrasted and separated has been the public and private. But public place is also seen a place of aggression, of power, of politics. The contrast is not made between private sphere and political sphere. And though the public sphere is political, liberals do not use that term in making a distinction between. He says that has actually written that the two places are actually not different. Because if you look at power and aggression, this is as much there in the private sphere also. So if we were to contrast whether the political in the public sphere and the political in the private sphere are same, then you have to take care of both. Not making any sense. Following what is being said.
Yes, ma'am.
She has also used. अच्छा कौन बोल रहा है?
Ananya bolo.
She has also used this term, na, morality. She has also even the feminists have also used the term morality, that women are considered more moral as compared to men, so therefore they are weaker and they cannot function in a political society, in a public sphere. They've
The private sphere is seen as a sphere of voluntarism, freedom, and spontaneous regulation. And political sphere is a sphere of power, force, and violence. And because women are into voluntarism, therefore they're not suitable for the public sphere. There's the other take on it. So that because they are, and you know, because when we talk about power and aggression and politics, then we are not talking about morality. And women will be ill-suited to operate in that sphere. So power and morality are also seen as a contrasting values. And men have power, women have morality. And politics is all about power. Therefore, women are not suited for this. And so there are two groups where people were there. One who was asking for equal rights to women, the other group which was opposing it. So what were the reasons for supporting it? That it will be useful for promoting their own interest, personal interest, and their rights, their rights, etc. For the same reason because of which men should have the right to vote. And the second one was participation. So what the opposition was saying, what was the opposition to participation of women in voting? Their sphere is domestic. They do not know the world. And therefore, they will not be able to make a free choice. In fact, as men choose their career, they choose their husbands. That is their career choice. And even after education, so first of all was whether women should be given education. Remember, I don't know whether your generation saw it, but perhaps your generation also saw it. When we started talking about education for women, and I think I've heard this phrase for sure, teaching a man is like teaching one man. Teaching a woman is
Teaching the generation.
Educating whole family.
So the justification why women should be educated were not to become part of the public sphere. They were still being readied for taking the family responsibility in a better manner. So the education was not for the purposes of emancipation, for job. It was to run your family better, in order to train your children better, in order to maintain your budget better. So it was all to do with the private sphere. Education was not for emancipation. And the same thing was here also, that even after education, women will still choose to be the housewives. It is not that education will give them the independent mind to be taking on the world. So therefore, even the educated women cannot be given the right to vote, because even after education, they would still choose to be the housewives. Because this is what more suited for them. So if they're making their career as housewives, their exposure to the world is limited to the domestic sphere. And therefore, what do they know about the world? And we have heard this in India also, that when we made the panchayat elections available for women were just the front for the men to actually regulate the panchayat. It's only the second generation of the women panchayat heads that they came into their own second round. Initially, most of the seats which were reserved for women panchayat heads, they were all replicating. They were kind of just standing in place of their husbands. But actual meetings, etc., were also being attended by men only. So it was only that this was kind of said at that point of time that giving women the job at that point of time, giving the opportunity to participate is not going to be useful. Finally, they got it. It was also said that the participation in the public sphere is not to become powerful and exercise power. This was only for even those who were supporting voting by women. They were also saying it is in order to protect and promote their own interests. So it was not to think about the nation. It was also to talk about women's issues can be taken up by them, and therefore they can vote. So somewhere this whole in the liberal thought, it was never challenged. And lots of feminists, the first phase of feminism, also they asked for the sameness approach. We are human beings, but we are okay with families also. But in the public sphere, we should be treated as human beings. So when they were, and that was one of the major objections by the anti-suffrage people, they said that they were feeling threatened that if women come out in the public sphere to vote, they are voting in individual capacity. They're not voting as wives or daughters or mothers. They are voting in an individual capacity. So recognizing women as an individual human being would impact on the family sphere, because the construction of women or subordinate gets challenged if they come out in the election as equals. So that was a major theoretical objection, that if women are not equal, how can they vote equally at an equal platform? And do we know any practices even today in different parts of the world? Forget about India, of course, thousands. But in many parts of the world, where there are restrictions, and we can think that why would restriction be there? But they're there. You cannot drive alone. You cannot drive. Forget about alone. And we do know that so many stereotypical images being created of women drivers as being reckless and careless and not properly skilled. So all these are, and I remember I started driving in 1986. It wasn't so long ago, if you look at the whole history of women's struggle. And I still had children shouting on the roadsides, "Are dekho, aurat gaadi chala rahi hai." Means I've seen it myself in my own life. So I did not know it was such a big thing. And but it was a big thing in 1986 for a woman to be driving. And I had another instance, which is very interesting. We were with my colleagues, I was driving to Indian Institute. We used to go there very often for seminars and all. So that day I had 3 male colleagues and I was in the driving seat. So a colleague was sitting next to me also. And I didn't realize that he was having any problem with me driving and he's sitting. So when we reached ILI, he made the comment, "Oh, people must be thinking I'm teaching you how to drive." I mean, such problems with just a woman driver sitting next to you. And therefore, this whole thing about challenging stereotypical images, and this was certainly saying that if we have accepted, and Carol Bettman is emphasizing on that part itself also, that once this whole struggle was indicative of the contrasting values of the two spheres, which liberalism never paid attention to. Liberalism, liberal school of thought kept focusing on the public sphere as being equal, etc., while recognizing that private sphere is required. But why is the private sphere not equal? There's no discussion about that. So initial feminists also accepted that as normal. that women, because of their biology, they have certainly to look after the family. There's no two ways about it. So without questioning, the later feminist thought, when we talk about liberalism and feminism is similar to the extent in the context of the first school, first wave of feminism, where they said, give us whatever you give to men, give it to us. And in the public sphere, they did not challenge at all. But later on, it was realized, the later feminists realized that the relationship between private and public is so strong and so interconnected and interdependent that unless you look after the private sphere, unless you ensure the equality in the private sphere, women cannot participate in the public sphere and on equal footing. And therefore, this whole division is said to be it is false. It is artificially created. There's nothing God given about private and public. We created this private public dichotomy. And remember your judgment. What is that case? Harvinder Singh, I think Harvinder Kaur or Harvinder Singh, where the Supreme Court said allowing law in the family sphere is like allowing a bull in the china shop. Do you remember this from your family law classes? In a restitution of conjugal rights thing, the Saroj Rani, I think, was the case where it was declared unconstitutional, and then Harvinder Kaur, where the Supreme Court reintroduced restitution of conjugal rights as a remedy. And in that, the Supreme Court says allowing bull in the family sphere is like allowing law in the private sphere is like allowing a bull in a china shop. Now, what are the similes? Family relationships are like as fragile as China, as a pottery made from China is. It's not China. It's kind of, it's a very beautiful and thin kind of a pottery made. So it's called China. So that is very fragile and can break very easily. So the family ties can break very easily. And if you allow law to enter that sphere, it will destroy everything. And therefore, law must keep out of the family sphere. And there has been a lot of resistance in bringing law. Now, we do have lots of laws which are coming into that sphere. We have the Domestic Violence Act, for example. We've got lots of laws are making an inroad. But the basic premise has been law is not permissible in the private sphere. This is a sphere of love and affection, ties, fragile, and therefore I ask this question: what is the nature of law? What is the purpose of law? If for all purposes we say it's an instrument of justice, it is for regulation, it is for law and order, then how does the law changes its nature and becomes a bull in the private sphere? I'll stop with that. We continue with identities tomorrow. So moving from here to the next area of discussion. I'm seeing some people are marking presence. Everybody please do that. And we meet tomorrow at 2:00. If you have any questions on this one, you can ask me tomorrow before we start talking about identities. We will try to understand this whole range of other terminology and meaning that we have. You're welcome. Well, stop recording.
Okay, ma'am.